Thank you, Charlotte. Fantastic. Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, and everybody, I will also share these slides. So if that's helpful for you down the track, you'll have a copy of these as you sort of take any notes or whatever. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm a real fan of the work you're all doing in the sector and of Climate Salad. And I'm really just doing this because I really want to see the sector grow and for all of you to build very successful businesses. So I've tried to tailor this to the sorts of businesses that I've seen in the ecosystem, but I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So if there's something I haven't covered, feel free to raise that at the very end. Hopefully everyone can see my presentation. I'm seeing out if it's not the case. I've sort of split the agenda up today into 4 chunks. I've started off with why the hiring process is important. Then we're going to sort of go through some of the complexities of why it's actually a challenging, tricky thing to do. And then I'm going to go through the main stages in the hiring process, stage by stage, and kind of share with you a few of the things I've learned in my career so far. And then in the end, we're going to have a Q&A session where you're going to get a chance to reflect on your own challenges in your own organizations, and hopefully share some of the questions and comments you might have. So let's get rolling. So at the outset, I want to make clear, I'm not an HR professional or a recruiter by trade, but I have hired a lot of people when I was sort of sitting down thinking about this, when I was discussing it with Charlotte and Mick and so on at Climate Salad. I've played various roles in different sorts of businesses, including some startups, as I've kind of flagged there. And, you know, if you actually have a look at some of the recruiting I've done over the years, it's spanned a hell of a lot of different functional areas, sales, marketing, customer success, tech support, and so on, be in finance, BI. And then I had a big stint working for a group called 13Sick, which provides after hours home visits for a doctor for people out there in the community with young kids and in the aged care space. And so I recruited many hundreds of doctors through that role. So they are a very, very tricky challenge, I can tell you, but have learned a few things along the way. I haven't been mega involved in hiring software engineers. So if that's the roles that you're really interested in learning a bit about, I do think a lot of these tips I'm going to share with you below apply, but there are some specific challenges in these roles, particularly if you're a non-technical manager trying to hire software developers. So if that's what applies to you, I can certainly make some introductions for you, some people I know who are very good at this and you know, have really refined their techniques over the years. So why is the hiring process important? Well, look, you know, it's possibly a cliche, but really great businesses only happen because of brilliant and determined groups of people. And, you know, you can have the best idea, the best tech in the world, but the truth is companies are people, and, you know, you really need to have the right group around the table to be successful. And, you know, it's actually staggering how poorly hiring is done in my experience. Many people struggle with this, make, you know, bad decisions. And, you know, I think that's testament to how difficult it is, as we'll get into a sec, but it is really, it really is catastrophic if you get it wrong, or it can certainly be. As I say, you know, business is a team sport. There's no, most roles do require collaboration and people working together. And, you know, you really, you're trying to bring together a kind of a little science experiment of different expertise and experience and skills. And so there's a cultural dimension here too. It's not just about finding the absolute best person you can find in the functional area that the role that you're hiring for needs to cover off. They've also got to be able to participate in that hard to pin down culture side of your organization. And you know, it's incredibly important, I think, that bit is done well. Getting it wrong, you know, the sorts of disasters I've observed include just the financial disaster of having someone on a fairly high salary who's very hard to move on if it turns out they're absolutely wrong for the role. And, you know, in a small organization, that can be really, really expensive. And, you know, if you think about, you know, a senior person on 150,000 plus, you know, this is a pretty major investment you're making. And, you know, you really, really want to be careful about your choices here. And so really thinking hard about the way you run your hiring process, I just think is mega, mega important. It also takes up a huge amount of time. You want to, if you're going to do it right, I think you do need to involve multiple senior people in your organization to make sure you're making the right call. And so getting it wrong and then having to repeat it will burn really valuable senior management time. And that's something also that's really precious. And then the final thing is, having a poisonous person on your team or someone who's just not competent or not a hard worker unfortunately has a bit of a spreading effect amongst your existing team. And even those who are actually perfect for your organization can be really put off if you've made the wrong call there. So it's a fairly high stakes process. And so therefore I really want you to all sort of take it as serious as you can and be really planned and thoughtful about it. Why is it tricky? Why is it difficult? Well, first up, it's a cliche again, but, there is a war for talent on. There's a lot of, high performing people have a lot of options these days. And, there's a lot of competition for their skills and for the energy and determination they've got. It's also quite a noisy marketplace. There's a lot of people out there advertising for positions and roles, quite well-resourced organizations, big corporates, governments, others who also have the same challenges. And, if you're a smaller organization trying to find the perfect person for your role, you've got to work your way through the noise to find those people. And so it can be really, really tricky to get good quality applicants for your roles. In my experience also, another tricky thing about this is that some people who are really good at job interviews are actually terrible employees. Those two skill sets sometimes overlap, sometimes they don't. And there are pitfalls for managers who just rely on a brilliant performance in an interview, I think. Also, I would call out that determining cultural fit is not easy to do, particularly if you're trying to do it quickly. And that's something that you often don't realize how wrong you've got it till later on, once the person's actually started, and that can be a tricky thing to manage. It's not always catastrophic. These things can be managed and people are open to changing, but it can be tricky. And the other thing I'd call out is that there are trade-offs galore here, and they're hard trade-offs. Sometimes you'll find someone who's amazing, but their salary expectations are beyond your budget. And so what do you do about that? Do you compromise on the budget? Do you compromise on the candidate? Sometimes you'll find someone who's really good, they're just compelling in the application process and interview, but they don't have critical skills that you need. Do you take a punt and hope you can train them in those skills? Or do you go and try and find someone who's got the full toolkit off the shelf ready to go, but who might not be so amazing in your interviewing process? So that's a trade-off you need to think about. And then the sort of, what if you don't find anybody who really meets the standards you're looking for? How long can you survive without that person? Will this hold back really important momentum you're trying to build in your business? So, sometimes the smart call is not to hire and to re-advertise and to re-strategize. But there is a cost in the time that'll take to find somebody new. So it's a tricky process. Next, I'm going to go through my sort of tips I've learned along the way in the different stages of the recruiting process. I don't think there's a definitive, perfect best practice way to do this. So this is more just grist for the mill, adapt and adopt these ideas as you see fit. Sometimes it won't be suitable for your organization or for the particular role you're hiring for, but I thought I'd just sort of share it with you so that you can get a feel for what's worked in my world. So starting off with a very boring topic, most people find position descriptions a fairly dull part of the recruiting process, but I suppose I want to get this on your radar up front because it's actually really, really important to put some serious thought into this and to get it right. Why is that? One, there's actually multiple audiences for this position description, and it actually goes to just the effectiveness of no matter who you hire, the value your business gets from the role that you are filling. So I see the audience both being the candidates that you're seeking to interview for the role and apply, your team who are going to be involved in hiring this role, the people involved in interviews and screening and others and so on. And then finally, that should be a 3 in that last bracket. It actually should be really important for the new person who's starting in the role and their manager. It should give that person a clear sense of what the expectations are, what success looks like, what's outside the scope of the role and needs to be the responsibility of others. And so I think it's really important that this get documented properly. And I think huge numbers of organizations don't put the effort into this or produce bad job descriptions that are too vague, too big, insufficiently precise, and as a result lead to bad hiring choices, and they undermine the effectiveness and the productivity of their team. So I really think this is an area you want to put some thought into. There's a lot of examples out there in the wider world of what these things look like. And there is no perfect template for it, but I just want to emphasize putting some thought into it and really reflecting on it and discussing it in your organization. I think is a really good idea. Some organizations put together a sort of job ad / PD combination and then just whack that up on Seek or LinkedIn. I strongly advise you don't do that. I think they are different documents for different purposes. The PD ought to be more broad, more detailed, and it's kind of got an ongoing life. The ad is really, it's about getting candidates into your pipeline for this role, and we'll talk about the ad in a second. So different horses for courses, but different things. I like to include more than just skills and responsibilities and so on in the PD. I like to think about things like the KPIs or measures of success for this role. I like to get in some detail about the operating style of the individual that you're seeking. I like to get in some detail on the career and aspirations fit for this person. So where are they at in their career? Ideally, what are you looking for? Is this a sort of second job out for a graduate? Is this, someone stepping back who's looking to, consolidate on some skills they've got somewhere else? Is this someone who's aspiring to be a manager of big teams, and this is a sort of a stepping stone on the journey? Is this for someone who's a real individual contributor who's just good at a particular functional area, and that's really what you need in this? Who do they report to? What does that look like? What's the manager going to be like that they're working with? Is that a really high touch, detail-oriented manager? Is that someone who wants someone to be much more autonomous and so on? All of these things matter. Finally, on the pay scale, this is something that needs to be in the position description, in my view. Maybe not in the version you send to your candidates, but certainly it needs to be known internally amongst the people who are going to be involved in the decision. And it needs to be brought into the discussions with candidates, I think, early. It should be a range rather than a specific number. But, unless you do this, you're going to be wasting people's time and you're going to be wasting your organization's time. I just think people get tied up in trying to keep this stuff too confidential, and it ends up, I think, creating more trouble than it's worth. I think it's better to be clear about what you are prepared to pay, and understand, and do so with an understanding of what the market will, what people can command in the market for these sorts of roles by going and taking a look at the published information. Like big HR groups like Hayes and Michael Page publish surveys, salary guides and surveys every year. There's a really great AWS survey of the Australian startup scene in terms of salary levels in all sorts of different roles. It was published a couple of years back. It might be a bit out of date now, but this will give you a really good feel for what people can earn in other organisations doing the same sorts of things. And I just think you want to get that clear in your mind. Doesn't mean you can't put some wiggle room around it, but I think it's important. The ad itself. Well, look, my thoughts on this one are I really like job ads, and I've had a lot of success with job ads where there's a bit more personality in it. It's an opportunity for you to showcase what your mission is, what your organization's like as a kind of collection of people and a culture, what's important to you, what's great about your organization, and why you think other people should work there. I think what I don't think works is plain vanilla advertising that looks just like every other job ad out there. sometimes if you've got a compelling brand or something special about you, maybe you can afford to be a bit casual with these, but I strongly encourage you to get a bit of your own personality as a company, as a leader and a manager into your ads. And I think you should give managers the discretion to play around with this a bit, particularly if they're good writers and they are looking to really stand out in the job market. I've included a couple of links to one company I've worked at, which I think does a really good job here. That's Style, which is a science teaching solution for secondary schools. They've got a video on their careers page, which really gives you a bit of a flavour of what it's like to work at the organisation. And I think it does a great job of giving everybody who's potentially interested in working there a feel for what it's like. I also think the organisation, any organisation these days, really needs to be serious about its role in developing the careers of the people who work there. Unless you're doing that, you're really just not a best practice employer. Yes, it's harder in a smaller organisation to be able to offer this, but if you're serious about building something with a real impact, you need to be serious about the careers of the people in your organisation, and I think you should be explicit about what that means. If it's about a share of your budget that's allocated to professional development, or it's a particular approach that you take to helping people in their careers, or if it's about where these roles that you're filling lead to, lay it on the line, make it clear. Because I think the best candidates out there in the market, the sort of people you do want to hire, are actually going to be brilliant for you. This is what's in their mind, because they're development-oriented people. If they're development-oriented people in their own career, they're going to be development-oriented in your business, and that's what you want. So this is a great area to talk about in your ads. Ideally, you don't want to advertise at all. If you've got a great file full of people who've expressed an interest in working for you in the past, even better to be able to just go out to those people directly before you start advertising and say, hey, we've got a role coming up, this might interest you. So in several of the organizations I've worked at, that's been really, really CEO-led. The whole organization knows it's part of the process of identifying great potential future employees at conferences and at customers and at partners and suppliers, and just in the wider network of friends and family and others that people come across. And that basically making it clear that we have growth aspirations. Roles are going to be coming up. We want good quality people, and the idea of keeping people on file and then being serious about reaching out to them when a role comes along and just getting quite organized there is a really, really important part of being a successful employer, in my view. As I say, I don't think the ad should be super detailed. That the detail can come later, but I think it needs to be punchy, and I think it needs to contain some personality. Where, in fact, to advertise, look, it depends a bit on the role and the seniority and the functional area that it's in. There's all sorts of options out these days. Won't be the same for every role. It's if you're uncertain, it's the sort of thing that asking for advice and getting people's opinion about this sort of thing is worth doing, and going and talking to some of the providers, getting them to pitch you on why their site or their platform or their organization can play a role here. Do some research on it, because I tell you what, the big ones, the Seeks and the Indeeds and the LinkedIns, are very crowded, and the big professional organizations with huge budgets are the ones who are winning often in those spaces. So if you're a smaller challenger organization, you need to think a bit laterally, and so do your research there rather than just going with the tried and true. The tried and true is essential. It's that's where the volume is, but it's uncanny how often unconventional places generate the best candidates. The application, so I often, some people will be like, here's my LinkedIn profile and that's my CV. I don't like that. I want people to actually put some thought into highlighting their experience and their particular skills in their CV. If they're not prepared to do that, it's, they're not the right candidate for me often. I also like to ask for the old-fashioned cover letter, but rather than just saying, hey, send me a cover letter, I often pose a question. to get them thinking hard about this particular organization that they're applying to, and or what they particularly bring. And, not everybody's a brilliant writer, but what you're trying to flush out with this cover letter is, what energy and excitement are they going to bring to the organization and the role? Have they taken the trouble to actually put something together, perhaps tested it with a colleague or a family member or a friend before they submitted it? Everybody's capable of actually getting something special into a nice cover letter. It's only a page, and I reckon it's an important threshold. I just put a little note in there around the kind of shortlisting or culling process, because sometimes if you're working in a sector like you guys in the climate tech space, you may well get a hell of a lot of applications, and there is actually a bit of there's a lot of labour time involved in kind of reviewing and reviewing all of them. Often I'll utilise a sort of an exercise that's sort of a pre-interview exercise as a way to kind of shrink down a fairly long shortlist. You might sort of do a quick scan, or have someone in your organisation do a quick scan to sort of pull out the 10 strongest applicants. Well, if you want to get that really down to an interviewable list, we'll get people doing an exercise of some kind. Might be a data analysis exercise. It might be a prospecting letter if the person's in sales. It might be a particular challenge if they're, a tech support or account management role, and their response to that can help you shrink the list down to an interviewable number. If you're interviewing more than, I reckon, 3 or 4 people, you're doing too many interviews, in my view. I would try and keep it to that number if you can. The interview process itself, and partly why I think the number of interviewees should be a reasonably small list, is that I'm in favour of a quite intensive interviewing process. So I definitely think there should be multiple interviews for every strong contender. I like to see multiple interviewers in each interview. And that's for several reasons. I think determining cultural fit is actually, I think, a very hard thing for one individual to do. And where it works best, in my view, is if you actually have multiple people meeting and interviewing a candidate and giving you and kind of discussing their reactions and their assessment of that person and their style and what they're going to be like to work with. It's amazing what comes out in those conversations after someone who's a pretty strong contender has been through a few different interviews with all sorts of different people in your organisation, whether it be junior, senior, mid-ranking, or support roles. Having multiple opinions around the table often can surface things that you might have missed as a busy leader in your organisation. So I think I do like the idea of interview guides. I often prepare them just to kind of make sure that I'm making good use of the interviewing time that I'm allocating, and to steer other people I'm getting involved in my interview process. But they're definitely not scripts. I encourage people to get a bit lateral and to sort of pursue questions that are occurring to them while the conversation with the candidate's going on, because often those are the most revealing. It's actually the interplay between the interviewers and the interviewee which surfaces, I think, just how amazing somebody is, or surfaces where someone's got a real weak spot, or an issue with their fit for what you're looking for. I've put in here a dot point around top grading, or which can often be called chronological or biographical interviewing. Some organisations absolutely swear by this as a way to hire the absolute very best people for their role. For those who haven't heard of this, this is basically forensically, often over quite a long period, like an hour and a half, 2 hours, going through a candidate's CV and talking with them about every single decision they've made in their career to that point. I've seen this done in organisations. Style, where I worked a couple of jobs ago, does this. It's quite a laborious process. Their thesis is that it really surfaces, it basically gives you an insight into the way people handle adversity, into the way people make life choices, critical life choices themselves, how they're going to make decisions in their role in your organization. I must say, I think it potentially helps you identify incredibly structured, sort of possibly reasonably conventional people. I'm not sure it helps you find all successful A grade sort of people, but anyway, it's worth exploring. It might suit you in your organization, or it might suit you in particular roles. Cultural fit interviews. So, I think what I'm kind of calling out here is that I think this is as important as functional skills and being able to demonstrate this person's got the experience to be able to execute on the tasks they're going to be responsible for. And the cultural side, because almost every role is a role that's interacting with other members of teams, with senior people, with customers, with suppliers, with junior people, if you're managing that, this role is going to manage others. And exactly how people handle that interaction with others is not always evident in a job interview when they're on their best behavior, or when they're putting their best foot forward. And so what I'd like there being specific cultural fit interviews, particularly if you get into the end of a process and you're starting to think you might be in a position to offer this role to somebody, getting them to meet maybe more junior people in your organization, or people in, who aren't that people they would naturally regard as their peers or more senior to them, can flush out some of those behaviors that can be quite damaging. There's, particularly, I've had some situations where particularly arrogant men who didn't appear to be arrogant in their first couple of interviews it's pretty obvious they were pretty arrogant when they were in an interview process with one of our support people in our office. We really, that's not what we're trying to foster in our organization. And it was, a surprise to see that come out. So just, it's an important part of the process. Flicking on to the next page on interviews, depending on the role, you might actually set up an exercise for a candidate to actually complete a presentation or respond to a case study in an interview. This is often done in the world of management consulting, which I did before I got into working in companies. I often find these quite revealing. Particularly on the upside. So people surprise you with how well they execute on the spot sometimes with these case study interviews. And, the purpose actually isn't coming up with the right answer. It's actually being able to showcase how well you communicate, how well you think, what the kind of questions that candidates ask about the case study. All of these things are really, really useful and revealing, and actually achieve a different thing than just sort of a question and answer with traditional questions in a job interview. The candidate questions piece I put in, I think I really like being explicit before someone comes to an interview, to prepare them to make sure they are coming along with a decent number of their own questions about the role and about the organisation. We're talking, I reckon 15 minutes is a good number here. And I think the quality of the questions that are asked and the thought that someone's put into this stuff as a candidate is incredibly revealing. And it's actually staggering how poorly this is done by very high quality people who just really don't take the opportunity to seriously interrogate the organisation they're about to devote their working lives to for a period. I genuinely think this is a way that high performing people can differentiate themselves, and I want to give them a chance to do so. It's an area I encourage you to be quite proactive about managing through the journey. So let's say you found someone you think's great, the sort of how we're going to actually get them into our organisation. A few things I've picked up over the years. Time kills the deal. The good people really are in demand and are pretty proactive with their own careers, and if your processes are a bit slow internally and you're a bit slow in circling back to someone who you've decided as a company you want, it's just the worst mistake to make, because you put all this effort into advertising and then running an interview process and all that thinking about this role. Once you've decided, you want to get that person contracted and locked in as soon as you can. Don't drag it on. And salary, you're going to have to haggle. It always is the way. People have an expectation of a bit of a haggle around salary. So assume this is the case. And when you make your offers, assume you might well have to bump it up to get someone across the line. And so I just be careful about what dollars you put in when you first put an offer on the table. If it turns out that you're just poles apart or quite a long way apart, the candidate you want and your budget or what you can afford, I encourage you to think a little bit further about, all right, well, what else can we do? You never know. It might well be that this person really values their leisure time and actually wouldn't mind working part-time. I've hired a bunch of people who actually, just wanted to have a bit of flexibility in their week. They might have kids or, caring responsibilities for elderly relatives. And tell you what, you get incredible amount out of a 4-day or 3-day a week person. Often these part-time people are actually incredibly productive, and you end up paying them, 60 or 80% of what you had originally thought about paying anyway. So that's something to put on the table. I also like the idea of just if they do want more than you're prepared to offer, well, have a think about some sort of bonus or performance-linked incentive structure that really ties what you really need as an organisation from this role to them delivering it. And think about, well, if you could tie that outcome or that kind of success factor or something or that project being executed to a dollar figure, would it be worth paying them a bit more? Particularly, if in a fast-moving organisation where you've got some really tough problems to solve, maybe that's the way to introduce it. So obviously, some thought needs to be put into how you document this, and you're taking on you're taking on a bit more of a sort of complicated hire, but it might be a way to get someone who's genuinely amazing on board for a lower amount of money in the near term. So that's my thoughts on the on how to hire. But I really want your questions and your comments. If any of that sparked follow-up questions from you, I really wanted to give you all a bit of a chance now to take a couple of minutes and have a bit of a think about your hiring and your organisation. So if you are hiring now, or you're going to be hiring over the next few months, what are you most uncertain about? What are you worried about? Have you had any particular issues in the past? Is there a specific part of the process that I've just talked about that you got a follow-up question on? I thought, Charlotte, we might just get people to reflect for a couple of minutes and then just put their questions in the chat on the Zoom call. I think, has everybody got access to the chat, Charlotte, or is that not the case?
We do, and actually a few questions have already come up. So it'd be good to, I guess, tackle them, and then we can go into, it might provocate some more discussion. Tim, if you stop sharing, you'll probably be able to see it, or you can.
Yeah, I've just pulled it up. Let me have a look.
So Maria and Phoebe, would you like to jump in with your questions here? I mean, I can read them from the chat, but it's always better if it's not just my voice.
Hi, thanks for that, Tim. Just a question before my formal question. I guess hiring is honestly the bane of my existence. It's really, I think, difficult when you're a small business or a startup, because most people just don't fit into that mold of what you actually need. And I think we have trouble attracting those kind of 5% of people who would be a good fit in a startup to us. Like we get a lot of people from corporate backgrounds who have worked for large companies, but those type of people never seem to work out. So my first question is, what can we do to tap into that? Because there is a large talent pool that is specifically interested in startups, but we just can't seem to tap into that pool. And then my second question was around what you were saying about having an assessment before the first interview. Now, we normally, for technical roles, we have a coding assessment after the first interview, and that generally discards about 99% of people. So wondering your thoughts on, should we be doing that upfront? But I mean, it is quite involved. So is that too much to ask candidates to do before they've even had a chance to do a first interview?
Yeah, look, I'll take your second question first. Look, this is a really fraught area, and I'm not convinced I have the answers in it. So at Compass, where I work now, we've probably got 100 software engineers, and we probably have higher turnover in those roles than we would like, and we probably make more mistakes than we'd like. And we do have a similar process to yours, but I'm not convinced it's working. And I think the challenge we have, I think, is that some of the very best people know they've got a lot of options and are resistant to following an onerous upfront process like you've articulated. But it's essential because there are so many people who are pretenders here who aren't actually much good. So look, I mean, if the challenge we have, what I would counsel is that the organisation that I've been at with software engineers on staff who's been most successful at both finding incredibly high performers and then keeping them is a highly mission-driven organisation. So this is Style. So Style basically hires people because of, with mission first, and they've got, very, very talented software engineers who are paid pretty well and who are very good at articulating the technical challenges and excitement that the organisation brings, but they're actually filtering for passion around the mission. And because the mission is quite appealing to a lot of people who've got a software engineering background, there's kind of like a virtuous upward cycle there that often engineers are attracted to Style because of its mission, and they're prepared to jump through more hoops, and they're prepared to possibly take slightly less salary than they might be able to get in a kind of corporate job. But what the experience of working there is pretty amazing, and they are encouraged to share that through Glassdoor and everything else, and through their professional network. So I don't know, it's been driven by some founders, one of whom is a software engineer and he's also very good at this stuff. Byron, the Scav, the CEO there, he's not the CEO at the moment, he's off looking after a new baby, but he's been very good at sort of creating a really appealing culture for software engineers. But look, I'm not sure I've got any answers for you, but I've got a couple of people who have done a lot of this and who'd be very happy to talk to you about that topic. So I'll share that offer, and we can do an intro later on. In terms of the startup culture, I was going to ask you, Maria, so what are the kind of behavioral aspects or cultural aspects or the sort of operating styles that you associate with being in a startup? Is it to do with the flexibility? Is it to do with wanting to work incredible amount of hours? What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I think the main thing is just being a self-starter and being able to kind of solve your own problems, recognize your own issues, and work through that autonomously rather than, and I find, people who have been used to working in a corporate environment, they might have a team of, 50 other people around them who are all kind of doing that shared work together, and there isn't a whole lot of responsibility on any one individual.
Yeah. Look, my sort of sense is that sort of determination and kind of it to me, that just sounds like a great employee of any field, and it sounds as though you're attracting people who by virtue of where they've chosen to work in the past have been kind of acculturated to having a bit of a passenger kind of mindset. So maybe there's something you ought to be putting into your job ads and or your kind of initial screening to sort of save you time and energy about this, which actually sort of selects for that sort of that aptitude. Get people to actually articulate that self-starter part of their makeup. Where have they applied that? How does it work day to day for them? Like, what does their day look like? If their day is really a kind of taking instruction sort of a day, and that's what makes them happy, as distinct from, it's full of initiation, and their career and study history is full of actually being prepared to throw themselves in the deep end and try new things and learn from them. It feels as though it's almost like a sort of a personality type and kind of what motivates them thing you're missing, that you're getting people in the door who might sort of tick the boxes in terms of having related experience and skills, but they just want something different from their working lives than you're asking for. And so maybe that's maybe some work in and around the application itself to sort of get people who actually demonstrate in a letter or in a video about themselves or with specific examples, this stuff. Because I would have thought that's a reasonable expectation, and I think people who have that sort of mindset, should be able to articulate it. The other thing is, I suspect that are you getting these applications from your LinkedIn's and your Seeks, or where are you advertising?
LinkedIn predominantly.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I've had a lot of good applicants from alternative places like Ethical Jobs, for example. If I think if you're finding people who are extrinsically motivated, not necessarily sort of dollars and cents or corporate brand related, they're actually in it because of their values. I reckon that's the Venn diagram's got a big overlap with the sort of the startup style and self-starter style that you spoke about. So that kind of a organization's worth thinking about.
We also have a job board actually with Climate Salad, just to put it there, because we get approached a lot from people who want to join and work in this space who've already resigned from their job and they just want to work in climate tech. Tim, just on that application question, Phoebe had one. Phoebe, would you like, or Maria, you were replying to Phoebe about this in terms of like hiring for casual and contract roles. Phoebe, would you like to ask that?
Yeah, and I can give a little bit more context too. So on our end, so we've been sort of successful growing up to sort of 30, almost 40 people now, growing sort of bottom up skills most of the time. So we're bringing in people who are super passionate, ready to work really hard, very aligned on the mission, come in, and then we'll accelerate their career and offer a lot of support to do that. And we sort of have groups that come through in cohorts and do that. And at its best, there's some people who are promoted every 3 months, and most people are promoted within a 6-month frame. We go through that. What we haven't sort of cracked so much is how to bring high level talent in successfully, and we're hitting up with that number where you want to start bringing in people who can create quite sophisticated new functions for our business quite quickly. Really hard to sort of make decisions on the right type of profile to bring in. And it's a lot more expensive type of endeavor as well, compared to that sort of building, fostering, accelerating kind of hiring strategy. Obviously, we want to continue the former, what we've been doing, but we need to get good at both. So when I'm interviewing candidates at this high level, often I'm just like, it's such a high risk, and the direction they're wanting to go is, I'm not sure if I'm 100% aligned on, but it could be something sort of materially beneficial to the company. I'd love to, if they were willing to jump into some contract work before giving a head of or like a big title. And there might be other ways other than contract to get to spend a little bit more time with someone. And so my question was, have you ever seen that work? And I'm particularly interested on that high-end hire.
Yeah. Look, I have seen that work. We used to do that at Better Place. I think it was probably closer to sort of very short, small consultancies. Like often people aren't going to be prepared to quit their job on the promise of that. Sometimes they are, if they're really excited about your organization, but we had a couple of people, because we were raising a lot of money at Better Place, we needed a lot of people in our kind of financial strategy and kind of that team. And
particularly those roles, sort of technical sales roles as well, but those roles around finance and strategy.
Yeah, and we just sort of pulled out sort of chunky little tasks. Perhaps we were trying to pitch to a particular class of investor, and we needed some modelling done and some decks prepared and so on. And that just gave us a taste of what this person was like to work with. And they were prepared to do it with sort of evenings and weekends and the odd extra day. And I genuinely think that this is what I was trying to get at with the sort of case studies and everything in the interview. I think there's nothing like being able to try before you buy, both for them and for you. And I think for something that's really high stakes, like some of these senior roles in a growing organisation, I think it's a sensible move. And just because the outcome's not what's the particular nature of the contract, the outcome is, do you interact with them enough, and do they get a chance to showcase their skills enough for you to be able to work out, to effectively de-risk the decision to actually offer them something and hire them. So whether that looks like a project or a consultancy or a short-term contract, all of those things are feasible. But what I would avoid doing is giving them a contract that gives them people management or kind of customer relationship management authority. Because, effectively, if they don't work out, that just creates churn at the top and uncertainty, and is not great for the culture and so on. So, but in terms of completing kind of non-staff member facing or management and not customer facing stuff, I think it's a really sensible suggestion, and I would encourage you to do it.
Matthew, you have your hand up there. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so just wanted to, on that last point, it's essentially the career path, and apologies I'm not on video because I'm just driving and been listening to you between Adelaide and the Barossa Valley, but it's essentially the career path that I've taken with Deep Planet. Yes, I'd already left my CEO role running a not-for-profit and started my own consultancy, but then started working as them as a client for 2 years, or near on 2 years before them realizing that I could actually do a lot more for them, and we came to an agreement to go full-time as head of sales. So I think it can definitely be a really positive way of doing things. And as Tim was saying, for me to try them as well, like I had other clients that I would never even think of going full-time with in a similar role, and yet with Deep Planet, again, their mission, their culture, and those sorts of things is what drove me to basically say yes. So I just thought I'd put that in there.
Fantastic, Matthew. Yeah, there's a working example, maybe.
Is there one way, Tim, that and maybe this is for everyone there, to get around that, trying to attract high caliber talent without the high caliber budget to get into that equity share, that ESOP area? Is that one way that you've been able to tackle it? I'm just keen to hear from the room. Or Tim.
Yeah. I think that's a really important part of what you can offer as sort of high growth companies. And I would have thought that, the people, I know a lot of people in various sorts of startup businesses and sort of high growth technology businesses, and it's an expectation really for a lot of high caliber people. And I think if you don't have such a scheme in place, then you need one, really, I think. And I think it's quite a lot of people are prepared to really trim their sales a bit on their salary expectations with the right, equity piece. And I think, I just think it's a really, really important part of creating the culture you want. You want everybody acting like an owner, if you can, and be like a shareholder. And so, yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Charlotte. And, probably that was the case at Style. It was the case at Better Place. It's the case at Compass. It's wide, actually, reasonably wide participation in the employee share ownership scheme in all those organisations.
Tim, when you were saying before how you at conferences or at different events, you sort of pick people that you think would be great, and how do you manage that? Do you just have like an Excel spreadsheet of like potential people who would be great to work with?
Yeah, well, we have an HR department at Compass. And I'm flicking LinkedIn profiles normally, because it's normally someone I'm like, that person would be pretty good. That I'm not going to ask them to send a CV because I haven't got anything yet, but we need to keep an eye on that person. They sound amazing. And it's just part of that what the HR function does for us. But you could also just keep your own file, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or whatever. And I think it's incredible how many people in my team, whether even if they end up leaving, they like working with me, and they like working with people who I recruit. So there's a bit of and I've sort of had several people follow me across different organizations now. And, if you get along with someone in a conference or talking to someone at a customer organization or a supplier organization, and you think you actually really, you think about the world the right way, and you actually enjoy one another's company, well, that's a pretty good sign you're going to be successful working together. And so, I often will propose that as like, it's been great talking with you. Look, let's keep in touch, because, there are always opportunities at the organizations I work with, and I'd love to work together down the track. And just, make sure, the boring bit is just, making sure you're connected on LinkedIn and all that. But I think planting the idea that our organization and this person, might have a future down the track is something I do all the time. And, life's long, and, it's actually just, it's great to broaden that network, because it could be that those people are brilliant just for helping you get advice on something they know about, and that's actually not about employment, it's just about good advice. Or it could be that actually they're exactly the right person for this really tricky to hire role, and it helps you out with something down the track. So to me, it's just one of those skills that, and it's more than a skill, it's actually just a bit of an organizational discipline of just make sure you're doing it, because this leadership in a startup is a people game, and there's lots of great people out there, but you want to make sure you're actively connected into them, and make lots of friends, professional friends, because they're incredibly valuable.
Do we have time for a few more questions, or a couple more? Do you recommend like long probationary periods, or more so like contract to start with, to then, decouple risk and go into full time?
Oh, look, either can work in depending on the circumstances and the appetite of the person you're thinking to make the offer to. But yeah, I think give yourselves an out. What is tricky is getting rid of people who are not keen to go. Like that, the truth is that is expensive. I've been to the Fair Work Commission in mediation with 2 or 3 different employees, and if you can avoid it, it's probably good to avoid it. But I've also got a lot better at making it clear if someone is really not right, how to kind of politely but promptly get a change happening and make it a cooperative process. But in the end, you still need money to do that, and it's better money you'd prefer not to spend on remedying a bad decision around a staff member. But yeah, so I do think if you make your probation periods or your contracts too prevalent, it does create a little bit of anxiety amongst certain kinds of employees, and it's not necessarily great for your culture. But I don't, a couple, 2 months or something of that order, maybe 3 months, I reckon is a perfectly reasonable thing for any organisation to have. But if the whole organisation's on 6 or 12-month contracts, because you're sort of managing your risk and so on, I just think it's the wrong way to go about it. It's just I don't think you're being a responsible leader if that's how you're creating your culture, because it creates a short-term mindset. Like, people need their salaries, they've got obligations, families to support and so on. I think people need permanent roles, and you should have enough, you should be budgeting accordingly.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Tim, this has been really enlightening, and it's a tough one to grapple with startups, because you're just essentially disrupting, but then you look at a startup pitch deck, they always like having on their team some big names and the experiences in the background, but sometimes that's not always the best person or the best candidate for your team. You know, it's got to be a good cultural fit. So thank you for taking us through just, you know, your experience in hiring, what works, what hasn't landed so well. Do really appreciate that. And of course, you'll be sharing the deck with us so I can share that out. As per usual, I'd love to get a group selfie because I like to put that on our Slack channel. So if you can turn your cameras on. I've got to get the screen happening.
While you're doing that, Charlotte, I'm going to do a little plug for myself. I'm actually looking for advisory board consulting assignments in the climate tech world. I'm changing my kind of the portfolio of things that I do this year. So open door to anybody who's interested in talking further. I'm pretty excited about all the different businesses I've met through the Climate Salad universe. So my contact details are in the deck. If anybody wants a bit more of a chat at any point, be delighted to have it.
Wonderful. If we can smile, and that would be great. A smile's always welcome. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tim. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this has helped. We also do, we did have a workshop with Tim Brewer from Functionally, and you do have access to that free part of that tool. So thank you so much, Tim, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Bye, everybody.